Behavioral characteristics. Our goal is for you guys to be able to explain how behavioral characteristics such as adaptation, instinct, and learning habit of animals help them to survive in their environment. There's so many different types of environments, such as deserts, rainforests, oceans. So what are some of the things that you think help animals live in their different environments? Just like people, animals can change to better suit their environment. We can change our clothes and our houses, and so can they. There's different ways that they do this, through adaptation, learning habit, and instinct. And we are going to learn about all of them. Have you ever noticed how birds fly south for the winter? Why do you think that they do this? There are many different ways to survive. One is instinct. It's something that we are all born knowing we have to do, such as eating. We all know that we're hungry, and we know that being hungry means that we need to eat. However, learning habits are the things that our parents or peers teach us, things that over generations we pass down, such as what's the best way to get the food, like hunting techniques. Adaptation is one of the main reasons how animals can change. It is the changes in an organism that help them become better suited for their environment. There are two types of adaptation. Structural adaptation, it's when it's physical features that change, such as polar bear's fur. Their fur is specifically designed for their environment. Or bird bills. Each bird has a different bill that suits how that it best gets its food. The other type is behavioral, and this is the things that animals do, such as the way that birds call. Those are behaviors that have changed and can be modified throughout time to better suit their needs. And migration. The main person that has come up with this, that takes credit for most of our research and things we've learned from it, is Charles Darwin. And we credit him with a theory of evolution, and he exposed natural selection and what that means to our environments. He is responsible for publishing a lot of evidence on evolution as well. Natural selection. This is a very important process that we must fully understand to be able to explain how adaptations occur. This is a process that weeds out the weak organisms of a species. First, there's a conflict. So let's go through this chart. It starts out with an environmental problem. So this creates limited resources. So because there's limited resources, the animals must compete in order to survive. Now, there's always a trait that is different among them. Not all of them are made exactly the same. And the preferred trait will give an advantage over the others. So the others that will die off, leaving animals only with the preferred trait. Now this trait is going to be passed down through the generations through reproduction. And that is how evolution occurs. Now let's consider the peppered moths of Britain. This is a picture of a peppered moth. Now these moths matched perfectly to the local trees in Britain, so the birds could not be seen as well. During the Industrial Revolution in Britain, factories popped up and the soot from the factories turned the trees black. Now there was a genetic change in some moths that changed a couple of them all black instead of the peppered color. So now these moths had the advantage because they matched the soot-covered trees. So this led to the birds being able to see the peppered moths better, and then they started to eat them. So eventually all that was left was the black moths that reproduced and created more black moths, and soon the peppered moths were hardly ever seen. And so this black coloring became the dominant trait, and the peppered coloring became all but non-existent. Let's take a look at other animals' adaptations. Examples. First, let's look at penguins. One characteristic is their dark coloring on their backs and their white coloring on their front. This is because when swimming from the bottom, looking up, they will match the light coloring of the sky through the water, while when looking down into the water, they will match the dark colorings of the water. So this will help them protect against predators. Unlike other birds, penguins' wings have been modified into flippers, so their feathers, so that they can swim better due to where they live. And also, their feathers are specialized to stand the frigid climate. Another example is the polar bear. One characteristic is that they have a thick layer of blubber underneath their fur. This insulates them for when swimming in the ice-cold waters. Polar bears can also close their nostrils while swimming. And also another thing polar bears can do is they have modified their hunting seasons. So this would be an example of behavioral adaptation. They modified it to do most of their hunting in the summer months because it's warm, and in the winter months their behavior has modified to stay mostly hibernated and cooped up in their caves. So now I want you guys to try to explain a couple of these animals' adaptations. First, let's look at the rabbits. There are certain rabbits that have exceptionally big ears. Why do you think this is? Now another one is, like many animals, zebras run in herds. Can you explain why? And what type of adaptation do chameleons have, structural or behavioral, in this particular picture? So now I'd like you guys to take a mini quiz, so please get out a piece of scrap paper. Now, the first question is to choose whether it is a structural or behavioral adaptation. Buffaloes traveling in herds, the thick layer of blubber on a whale, or penguins building nests close to each other, and birds having extra light bones to fly. So for each example, I'd like you to write whether you think it is structural or behavioral. The second question is to describe how these traits developed. Use some of the words that we talked about earlier, such as adaptation, structural, behavioral, natural selection. I'd like you to review those and put those into your question, your answers. And the last question is to explain why it is necessary for them to have a trait develop like this. Okay, now we're going to do an activity, and I want you to just demonstrate your understanding of these concepts. I want you to make a poster, and I'd like you to get in groups of 2. And I'd like you to choose an animal. It can be any animal from any place in the world. And I want it to be an animal, though, that exhibits both structural and behavioral adaptations. I want you to make a poster of this animal with a picture on it, and everything. And I want you to highlight these characteristics. On the poster, I'd like you to explain why it has these traits and why it does those certain things, and as well as explain how it developed them. So please make the poster neat and colorful.